Sorry for the brief interruption. What I want to do at this point is I want to look at the next tab. So you'll notice that although we have assets equal to liabilities plus stockholders' equity, we have a negative cash amount, which likely is not feasible. We have to have some sort of a minimum positive cash balance. So in this case, what we'll do in the next tab is we will actually make this cash be a minimum of 20. Okay, we'll just put that in as an input up here. So our minimum cash balance then will be 20. Notice that I have 20 plus the 65 in inventory, which was the big purchase that took my cash negative. And if I add up the net PP&E to 85 in current assets, I end up with 181 as my total assets. With that same financing, notice that I only have 133.61 as my total liabilities and stockholders' equity. So at this point, I have a financing deficit, which is noted right there as 47.39. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to solve that particular problem by forcing the assets to be equal to my liabilities and stockholders' equity. So what I'll do is I'll take my total assets, and then I'll subtract my notes payable, I'll subtract my stockholders' equity, and I'll subtract my retained earnings. And when I do this, you'll notice that I get an error, which is a circular reference. Now the problem is I'm trying to solve for a line of credit, but the problem I'm having is that my retained earnings is going to change based on having a line of credit. And why would that be? Let me just get rid of this for right now. You'll notice that I have the blue lines that tell me what the cause of the line of credit is. But the short answer on that is I've got additional debt that's going to drive additional interest on my line of credit, which will change my net income, which will change my retained earnings. But remember, because of the way I set up the formula, the bank line of credit has to be dependent on my retained earnings, which is dependent on my interest, which is dependent on my line of credit. So I have sort of a circular problem here. Not a big deal. Excel has a function here. So what you're going to do is go in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm sorry, it's hidden from you based on how I've highlighted my screen. But I'll click that upper left-hand corner, and then I'll get options. And then when I go to options, and by the way, when you go to, if you have a Mac, what you want to do is preferences and then calculation to get to the same spot where after I click on formulas, you'll see the calculation options. So again, in the Mac, you would have preferences, calculations. Now, I've got automatic here, which is what I want. And by the way, if you have automatic except for data tables, let's just go ahead and click on automatic for that as well. But then what I want to do is I want to enable iterative calculations, and I'll have the maximum iterations. I set it as 1,000. That's probably about right. Maximum change 0.001. But now I'll say OK. And you'll notice now that I have the iteration is now solving for that, and my financing deficit is 0. So what I've been able to do now, what would have normally taken trial and error, I would have had to keep trying different numbers, right? So to go back for a second, if I had, in other words, went back this way, the other way you could do it, which would take a tremendous amount of time, is say, well, I have a deficit of 47.39. Let's put that in here. But you'll notice when you do that, you still have a deficit. The issue is that this is a trial and error process. You put in the bank line of credit that solved the original problem, but not this problem. So now I have to do, well, equals 47.39 plus 0.69. I still am off by 1, so I have to try another number. Let's try 4809. So you can see what I did with my iteration is I was able to do this all in one fell swoop. That's what iterative is doing for you. It's doing what those 3 calculations that I did, and it'll do up to 1,000 to solve this trial and error problem. simplifies this sort of circular problem and allows us to get to a number. So again, what I can do now, because I have iterative calculations, is this 181 minus bank note payable minus shareholders' equity minus retained earnings, and solve it in one fell swoop. And I have this financing deficit that's zero. So that is sort of your using an iterative calculation to solve for the line of credit. I'll be back and just talk about recursive in 1 second.